Good afternoon, everybody. It's so good to have you all here this afternoon with us. Welcome to our second for the calendar year, our second business dialogue for the calendar year. You know what the business dialogue forum is, where we take salient issues of the day. It could be industry specific, could be sector specific, it could be issue specific based on what's happening internationally and in our economy. And we have an experienced panel posit their view on and their expertise and leverage their expertise on that particular subject matter. This afternoon, we're speaking again of Jamaica's creative economy. We have been speaking about Jamaica's creative economy for a while, otherwise called the orange economy. From as early as the birth of JBDC, we have been advocating the virtues of Jamaica's creative economy from day one. And in 2019, we delivered a conference on the creative economy. And since then, we have not stopped at all. As a matter of fact, our work has intensified, has even grown stronger in the creative and cultural industries. This afternoon, we're speaking about Jamaica's orange economy, so rich yet so poor. And we have a really experienced expert panel with us to discuss that this afternoon, to unpack what that is about. I mean, we know it's not poor, we know that, but can we prove that it is indeed not poor? Yeah. And what of the entrepreneurs in the creative economy? What is their path to wealth and sustained wealth internationally as well? You know, so we're going to unpack a lot of those issues, and we have a very, like I said, an experienced panel to unpack these issues and many related issues as it relates to the creative economy. So welcome. We'll be with you for the next couple hours. But before we get into the discussion, we want to welcome our CEO to bring some opening remarks, Ms. Valerie Fiera. Ms. V.
Hi, everybody. And really, Harry has welcomed you, and JBDC have a big welcome all the time for everybody, as you know. And in thinking about the forum, I said to myself, you know, we are such a specially blessed nation, Jamaica. And not to be political now, but all of us know that the orange juice running all our DNA. And it flows through our music, through our food, through our architecture, through our fashion, through everything that we do. And yet the real benefit, the real richness that should flow to our people still eludes us. And I think about even our natural springs, Harry, and how we have this gushing gold from our mountains, and we sit down at the bottom, ponder and wonder how it's nice and wonderful and marvelous, but actually don't move into action. And I know there has been a lot of work done over the years, certainly in our 22 years, and not only JBDC, but some of our panelists and other entities have been doing work in the field. I think what we want to see now is how it comes together, as Harry says, how it flows into policy, how it flows into an ecosystem that is nourishing, and understand that this is the source of the wealth of this country. It is the source. And how do we get Let's Go Fund and all of these things that I say every day when we are such a wealthy nation? How do we manifest that wealth in the fullness of it? So I think the discussion this afternoon is a continuation of the important work that is being done. And as with all our forums, we're not pondering and wondering. We want at the end of the discussion that we move at least a step forward in the process of achieving this kind of organization of the support system, the ecosystem, and how as a people, all of us can benefit from this orange juice that we have been endowed in as Jamaica, land we love, and see it manifest in real things dropping out, funding, benefits, good life, and success and so on and so forth. So it's in the able hands of Harry himself, a creative, and our wonderful panelists, which I'm excited to hear from. And at the end of the day, to see how we have moved some steps forward.
All right. Thank you so much, Ms. V. And you said it, that our creative economy, the creative and cultural industries worldwide are just a fascinating set of industries. It's a set of industries that is defined not only by its economic value, wherever in the world, but by the social impact that it has. It defines, in many instances, the identity of a people. Your culture defines you and gives you ultimately your competitive advantage. I believe that, and I saw my friend Adrian say it this morning, I believe that the creative and cultural industries and we in Jamaica continue to punch way above our weight class. As a matter of fact, it can be argued that we are the most creative country in the world by capita or by square mile, however you want to put it. And I'm not only talking about the performing arts here, at all. I'm talking about all of the creative industries, including architecture. Yes, performing arts and theater, but visual arts as well, media, electronic media, film, etc., etc., etc. And one of our panelists will say that there are at least 20 plus industries, right, Deborah? That we have to deal with and have to develop and grow, and certainly all of which we believe certainly provide a competitive advantage for us in Jamaica. It's just a matter of how it is that we squeeze that juice, how it is that we set the framework, the ecosystem, so that that juice continues, not only squeeze once, but continuously squeeze. And we believe that the creative industries, and you can quote us, are the set of industries that will move Jamaica into sustained prosperity. Sustained prosperity. We just need to get it right. So, that said, I want to invite our guest speaker to bring greetings, Miss Olenka Jacobs Bonnick. Now, Olenka has, apart from her illustrious CV and her career, and no matter the young age, she has extensive international professional experience as a cultural and creative industry enterprise development specialist in the Caribbean and the Global South. Master's degree in cultural projects and cultural organizations. 23 years, according to her, 23 years of work, but she don't look like it's 23 years of work at all. Don't let that fool you. Right? But and she is with the she's joined the UNESCO Office for the Caribbean in Kingston as a coordinator for the Creative Caribbean Project, the first and largest single donor-funded project of its kind for the creative and cultural industries in the Caribbean region. She's also currently the National Program Officer for Culture with UNESCO. And apart from all these glorious things that are on Olenka's bio, her greatest achievement is being an alumni of JBDC.
Of course. And to be married to an alumni as well.
And to be married to an alumni as well. So the whole family is JBDC created, right? Almost, right? But in this afternoon, she comes to us not only as a JBDC alumni, but also as, like I said, the representative from UNESCO as the National Programs Officer for Culture and the coordinator for the Creative Caribbean project. And to bring her remarks, I now welcome Olenka.
Thank you so much, Harry and Miss V. Thank you. I've written a speech, but you and Miss V have already said the entire introduction. So great minds think alike. So I'm just going to go straight into it. And we're just going to carry on this conversation since you and Miss V have already started it. And I really want to touch on the issue of value. And it is really important and crucial at the point that we're at now in our creative and cultural, in the development of our creative and cultural industries, to promote a shift that recognizes the value of our sector. Now, it's clear that we do create value all around us. We see the evidence of that in our sector, value to communities, to audiences, value to businesses, value to education, value that can include, for example, high attendance figures for all artistic and cultural events, the transference of nonprofit cultural work into the commercial sector, cultural organizations going into partnership with the public education system. All of these things demonstrate that we are creating value. But we're having difficulty capturing as much value in revenue, fundraising, and earned income as we'd like to. So we need to look at what value we're creating first. But here is the thing about value. We, the creative sector, we don't get to decide what it is. The tricky thing about value is someone else gets to determine it. We get to determine price. And sometimes we are optimistic in assuming that our core values as an organization, as an enterprise, or even as an individual are somehow transferred to buyers and consumers and participants, as well as audiences, when they meet our price and they attend our events. But value isn't something that we determine. The consumer of that value determines the value. Like beauty, it's in the eye of the beholder. And we're now at a point where there's a gap between what we as insiders think that the value of culture and creativity is and what we want it to be in order to continue with business as usual. Value is always created in a context. And given that we don't determine the value, someone else does. Those who participate and who purchase our work, they have a context in which they're operating. What is that context? What is Jamaica's context? Creating, defining, and communicating our value now is the single biggest challenge for our sector and for the leaders of our cultural and creative institutions. We must continue to challenge this perception that art and culture are mere luxuries, or worse, for the dunce people. We know how that goes, and continue to advocate for them as drivers of economic growth and social development. Investing in the orange economy not only creates jobs and generates income, but also preserves Jamaica's rich cultural heritage and fosters a sense of national pride. However, to overcome the challenges that we are faced with and to bridge the gap between asset-rich, working poor, asset-rich, cash poor, and asset-rich, cash-rich, asset-rich, financially secure, we must collectively continue to push for wider access. Access to resources, to infrastructure, to the opportunities that we need to move our orange economy out of, that zone that's not really the friend zone, it's kind of undecided zone. It's more of a like, I like you, but I don't really like you that much, but you're okay, you can go through. We need to move out of that zone. So what are some of the steps or some of the opportunities that exist in order for us to move the Jamaican orange economy out of that zone? We have to advocate, as I was saying, for access, but wider. We have access, but we need wider access. Access to financing, as we all know, through innovative mechanisms that allow co-financing and allow Jamaica to reduce its cultural and creative stakeholders' dependency on international financing. Access to sector-specific information, support, and business advice about the future of work in our industries. access to credit, that's a big one, access to markets and audiences, as well as in-market access through enterprise acceleration and entrepreneurial training as offered by JBDC. Access to artistic and cultural development resources, such as data visualization, fellowships and residencies. Believe it or not, in the Caribbean, we do not have a large amount of fellowships and residencies for the creative and cultural industries. We don't offer them, and we are not necessarily invited to participate. We have very few in Jamaica, as a matter of fact. At the last count, there were about 5. When you consider the depth and breadth of our creative sector, we should have far more residencies and fellowships available. So cultural development resources also include virtual reality and augmented reality experiences. Now, of course, all of these things we can find in Jamaica, but do we have access to them? Who has access and who creates that access? Access also to reliable industry intelligence and data so that we can make informed creative and business decisions. Access to the latest creative and cultural skills, education and training, such as narrative design, cross-cultural communication, intercultural competence, digital and visual literacy. And at this point, I'd like to say that JCDC is a best practice model, not only in the Caribbean, but in many of the countries of the Global South. It's one of the few, if not the only organization of its kind, supported by government, that does what it does. So it's something that we can be very proud of. And in my experience, I've never seen a second or even another organization that is supported by government that does what JCDC does. Access to improved mobility of artists and cultural professionals, access to cross-cultural innovation and purpose-built infrastructure. We know that we need more purpose-built infrastructure. Access to opportunity for content and product development, training and jobs. Now, whilst we do have JBDC as a best practice model, and we still have Edna Manley as the first creative arts college in the Caribbean, the first and the oldest, we also need to think about the pathways to employment. How do we access those pathways? How do we reduce the brain drain that we are faced with on a permanent basis? How do we reduce the economic leakage that comes with the brain drain? So it's all well and good that we have JCDC and we have Edna Manley. We produce amazing creative talent, but the pathways to employment still are not clearly defined for those persons. The result of that is that they have to go overseas to ply their trade. They have to travel overseas, and there's nothing wrong with that because collaboration is extremely important. It's the lifeblood of the creative and cultural industries. But what we would like to see more in Jamaica is the opportunity to open those pathways to employment so those who need to go overseas can do so, but they don't have to. So these are some of the areas that I think would be wonderful for us to discuss today. Access to international best practices. We have global best practices right here, as I mentioned, JCDC. How can we amplify that for the purpose of developing our economy? It's a creative and cultural institution and organization that produces resources that can be modified and copied elsewhere in the world. How are we maximizing the input of JCDC? We are using it for our own purposes. We're developing our own students and young people, but we can also maximize what they offer by looking at other ways to collaborate with organizations or countries in other parts of the world who may be interested in this kind of resource for their country that will, in its own way, bring income into the economy. So there are lots of different levels of collaboration that we can consider. And of course, access to a proper valuation of our sector. Now, this list is non-exhaustive, and I'm certain that if you take a moment to think about access yourself, you too will be able to add to it. So what I would like to say, just in conclusion at this point, is that, as we all know, Jamaica's orange economy continues to demonstrate its tremendous potential to uplift communities, create employment opportunities, and contribute to the overall well-being of our nation. But we need to focus more on the value. We know, and that's not only valuing the sector, but the value to the consumer. Who is the consumer? We need to define a go-to-market strategy for, or better define a go-to-market strategy for the Jamaican creative and cultural industries as a whole. So when we're taking them to market, who are we selling it to? Why do they want it? How can they access it? All of those bits and pieces need to come together in a more coherent and cohesive approach, I believe, to the creative and cultural industries in Jamaica. And as a matter of fact, those questions of access and go to market were central to the development of the Creative Caribbean grant program that I'm the coordinator of. And it was a program that when we designed it, we threw everything but the kitchen sink at it, and we put all our hopes and dreams, aspirations for the Caribbean in that project. And when we were funded, it was really a fantastic opportunity for us to really address some of these issues, not only of access, but also of job creation and financial inequity in the sector. So just to close, JBDC, UNESCO, and also our partners at the Ministry of Culture, Gender, and Sport, Entertainment and Sport, and many other of our stakeholders, we all continue to work together to unlock the true transformative power of Jamaica's creative and cultural industries, as Ms. V said earlier. We continue to work towards paving the way for a more prosperous and culturally vibrant future for Jamaica. So let's just continue to join hands and to input into discussions like these with a view to building a sustainable now and a thriving future for Jamaica's orange economy. Thank you all for your kind attention. This was a very short address, but as I said, Ms. V and Harry, you got me for the introduction, so I didn't need to go there. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Olenka, JBDC alumni. I wasn't sure sometimes if you're talking about JBDC or JCDC, because I know JCDC also has a critical role in the ecosystem. You're deliberately speaking about both.
Yes.
I see. All right, cool. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for those words. I think one of the critical things coming out of the conversation just now, as started by Olenka, is the whole business of value definition. What is that value? How do we define that value? And ultimately, this is what determines how rich we are and the potential. Route to market is also an important thing. We have been talking about route to market and the fact that there is no clear defined route to market for creatives and the creative entrepreneurs. Yes, you have nodules of that form part of that route to market. But as a young creative, first of all, I'm giving thanks that we're probably past the days when you say as a youngster, I want to be a creative, and your parents say, no, boy, even if you have ambition. You know, I'm hoping that we're past those days. So that's socio-psychological barrier that we faced. I'm hoping that we're past those days. But the fact still remains, Ms. V says no, but the fact still remains that there is no clear route to market as a creative entrepreneur. And the whole business of value is what led us to embark on an economic impact assessment, having done a mapping of the creative and cultural industries in 2020. It's very, very important that we are able to articulate that value for the sector. I know Olenka was speaking about value at the macro level and also value at the enterprise level. But value at the macro level is extremely important. How do we articulate that value? How do we know exactly what that value is in an empirical way, such that our investments as government and as the private sector are just that, can be now turned into returns on that investment. But that is only defined when in fact we know exactly what that value is to begin with. There is no value that a creative can honestly put in a business model for the value of their particular industry. They don't know really and truly as it relates to Jamaica. They have to use international figures. All right, so here's it. Thank you so much, Olenka. We're going to jump into our panel discussions now. And like I mentioned, we have a very, very exciting panel. Private sector, public sector, multilateral organizations represented. and a wealth of experience and expertise in the field for us to really tap into and hear their thoughts on. The IDB, I think, and I can be corrected, but it's the first organization to call the creative economy the orange economy, and to really further that idea of the orange economy and so on. Several studies, several research papers, and also several initiatives that have been funded by the International Development Bank around the creative and cultural industries all over the world, and certainly in the Caribbean. Our first panelist this afternoon comes to us from IDB. She is a specialist in the competitiveness, technology, and innovation division in IDB, where she promotes technological adoption and strengthening of innovation and entrepreneurial ecosystem in Latin America and the Caribbean. Kayla Grant holds an MA in the International Trade Policy from UWI and a BA in International Business and Economics from the University of Indianapolis. So, Kayla, I want you this afternoon to speak with us, certainly generally from the perspective of IDB and how IDB sees, first of all, the creative and cultural industries in the Caribbean and Jamaica, and speak to us about value, about how you see quantifying this economic value. Can CCIs contribute significantly to GDP? What's your take on this, and what's IDB's take on this? Kayla.
Absolutely, and thank you very much for the introduction, and good to see the team at JBDC. And thank you for inviting the IDB to this discussion, especially as we're reflecting on the cultural and creative industries. In fact, the IDB has created a division specifically focused on the cultural and creative industries. And so there's been a number of publications also done with colleagues at UNESCO and other partners, both at the country level and of course other multilateral organizations, to take a look and to further the conversation on the creative industries. And so in speaking on this whole aspect of value, I'll definitely not go too much into that because it's a whole theoretical debate. I'm not sure if anyone has read this book by Mariana Mazzucato, where she looks and stirs up a very important debate about exactly what is value, because this type of discussion and the different theories of what value is has previously, before to her book coming out, has, I wouldn't say vanished from economics, but it's something that's not at the forefront of the economic debate, especially as we distinguish between what is value creation and value extraction. And this type of topic has emerged, especially when you see these a lot of what's happening in the financial economy, and whether that's value creation or value extraction. So it's quite an interesting feature. And so when we go to the topic about whether CCI can contribute significantly to GDP, for me, that's an unequivocal yes. There's no doubt in my mind about that. An older study, an analysis that was conducted by Oxford Economics for the IDB, the British Council, and the OAS, and this is back in 2014. Again, I'm stating an old stat just to show you that even back then, the two largest economies that they looked at in the hemisphere, Brazil and the United States, were estimated to account for over 10% of GDP. And to put this into comparison and into context, 11% of GDP in the US was roughly equivalent to the size of the entire US manufacturing sector. And the creative industries was 10% of GDP. And then when you look at other countries in the region, GDP contribution to the sector is estimated to actually be a little bit smaller when you're looking at more developing countries, between 2 to 7% in different countries across Latin America. And what this does, when you're looking at what's happening at larger countries versus developing countries, is that it illustrates the high growth potential of the sector. And it also illustrates that we need to be creating the right type of enabling conditions and environment in order to spur the growth of this industry. And then this is, of course, coming from UNESCO when we're looking at Jamaica now, and how we're looking at this wider context and where we are in Jamaica is notably the study by Nordicity that was done for JBDC and UNESCO estimated that the creative industries contributed about 5.2% of the country's GDP and accounted for about 3% of employment. And so this is compared to other countries. When we look at employment, that generate and account for between 5 to 11% of employment. Again, there's potential for growth. I won't go into export of trade, which shows yet another avenue for measuring the contribution of the cultural and creative industries to the economy. But there again, if you look at indicators such as the Global Innovation Index from WIPO, there's another proxy indicator, I would call it, that takes a look at the creative output of Jamaica, where Jamaica ranks 34 out of 132 countries in the world. And how they measure this is by looking at creative goods and services, which looks at creative goods export, which is about 0.2% of GDP, according to them. Cultural and creative services export is about 0.1% of the total trade, and it looks at online creativity as well. And of course, when you're looking at creative outputs, you're also measuring intangible assets that I'll come back to a little bit later. So again, I emphasize unequivocally, there's potential for CCIs to contribute significantly to GDP. So then our next question then is, how do we get there? And I believe this is where the first part, and you rightly pointed out to it, that was asked to me is, so how do we quantify the economic value of CCIs to contribute to economic growth? This data is something, and this has already been said, that's extremely important for not only creating this more enabling environment, but we need to have this data-driven policy making and also program design to support the development of the cultural and creative industries to contribute to the economy. But what is holding us back from having such data readily available? So this is where I would propose a few next steps. And these next steps that I'm about to say is nothing new. I'm reiterating what has already been said over and over. So to Valerie's point on as to what do we take out from here, is where I would love to have further discussion with everyone around the table and the audience as well. There certainly needs to be a continued collaboration between international organizations. We've worked with UNESCO, we've worked with the OAS and the CDB and several other organizations to do collaborative studies. For instance, one study that we did with UNESCO evaluated the impact of COVID-19 in the cultural and creative industries. Again, it highlighted the importance of the culture and the creative industries for sustainable development. So certainly this aspect of how we continue to work together, and what I would like to emphasize here is how we're working towards implementing a standardized framework that allows for comparisons across countries in order to determine estimates that depict the scale and the value of the sector, because there are so many different definitions that you can move forward with. So definitely how we're implementing that. The other aspect is reinforcing regional cooperation on this topic as led by partners that are present here today, and we see this happening. The other aspect is the development of innovative tools. And here's where I want to take a little bit of time, because I know my time is probably up at this point, to just emphasize on this whole aspect of the cultural satellite accounts and how we're moving forward in that particular area. So there is a publication from the IDB that I would love to point out that has been done by two of my colleagues, Matteo Grazzi and Jose Miguel Benavente, who in retrospect, I wish could have been here today, but they did a chapter that specifically looked at how we're measuring the contribution of the creative economy. And here is where the value and importance of investing in these cultural satellite accounts can provide invaluable information for policymakers, and giving a model for how to measure this economic contribution at this national level. A lot of the times what's used are different methods. And so again, going to that point of how we're standardizing those methods would be very important for identifying growth markets within the sector. Of course, looking at evidence-based policymaking for the creative and cultural industries, how we're better understanding what's happening within the creative industry so that we're better able to support and direct that growth, similar to what we're seeing happening in more advanced countries. And then the last thing that I'd like to quickly point out is this whole aspect of the relationship between creativity, innovation, and growth. There's much literature that points to the positive relationship between innovation and productivity. Productivity is a key variable for driving economic growth. At the IDB, our country strategy is focused on MSMEs, on the private sector, and specifically how we're driving productivity within the private sector. And the importance of creativity for that is profound. Why? Because creativity, in a sense, can be seen as, especially applied creativity, can be seen as a sense of being innovation. And so when you also look at companies and what they're looking for and the talent that they're bringing in, creativity or creative thinking is one of the top skills that's sought for after by employers. When you're looking at what's happening in the digital economy as well, what it's proving is the importance and the value of creativity in driving growth, in the development of new business models, of new innovations. And so recognizing the importance of this, and even more so the intangible nature of a lot of what happens within a creative economy, brings home and full circle again the importance of saying, what is this value? How do we measure it as we're evolving to a more information-based, to a more digital economy? And so I'll end off there and emphasize that on the IDB standpoint, especially our general manager for the Caribbean, Tariq, the creative industries, we just recently had an event on the creative industries 2 weeks ago, and we're asked to take next steps on supporting the creative industry. So please count the IDB as a partner as we move forward in this area. Thank you.
Great stuff. Thank you so much, Kayla. And clearly, we need to talk. We need to talk. Certainly with IDB and JBDC, we definitely need to speak. And I'm 100% supportive of especially your last point, where you are speaking about the relationship between creativity, innovation, and growth, and defining, helping to define the value of the creative and cultural industries. We have advocated for a while for one of the things that government are. So government really is in the middle of supporting the supply side, and of course also supporting the demand side, and making sure that we in the middle as government are what you call smart government, to enable rather than to hinder with bureaucracy and those type of things. But one of the things to support the demand side, and it goes now to the value creation and the value recognition of the creative industry, is the recognizing, deliberate, intentional recognizing the creative input of the creative industry entrepreneurs into the non-quote unquote creative industries. That spurs innovation, that's in fact spurs development and growth. And without those, we're dead. We're dead in the water. So it's very, very, very important point that you raised. Certainly. So we're gonna talk some more. We're gonna move on. But one of the things about defining value, though, and I lay hands on my second panelist, who is my very good friend from Wappy Kill Philip. I mean, what is the story with Wappy and Philip, by the way? Anyhow, and why did Wappy even kill Philip in the first place?
Terrible.
Anyhow, one of the things that goes towards the inputs in empirically defining culture is the whole business, and Kayla mentioned it, of data management, of data mining, of data extraction, and how it is that we do that. And if you're going to extract from our creative industries, then we're faced with another problem, the whole problem of informality, and the high level of informality in the creative and cultural industries. And let me just say that that's not a broad brush. Let me not broad brush it. That is not that all creative industries are informal and have a data management issue. That's not the case at all, because there are some creative industries that by definition have to understand data management and data mining and prioritize it and formalization as such as well. But the whole business of taking an entrepreneurial approach to your creative business, the whole business of creative entrepreneuring and entrepreneurship, and the formal and taking that formal and structuring your operations in a way to make it sustainable and scalable is a real issue. And here to give his thoughts on that particular issue is my good friend, who is a music scholar and entertainment consultant, renowned throughout Jamaica and the Caribbean for many years. He serves as director in several companies: Magnificent Ideas, Caribbean Global Network, Down Sound Book Publishing Limited, etc., founding general manager of RFM, executive producer of Art for Life, etc. He's known on TV as the milder of the judges for Rising Star. He's the mild-mannered ones, Alien is the excited one, and Anthony is the one that
them.
that tells them like it is. But this is the mild-mannered one, and perhaps most accurate in terms of his evaluation. My good friend Clyde Mackenzie, he is OD, and he is music scholar and entertainment consultant. Clyde, I want you to weigh in on this whole business of creative entrepreneuring and what it means, and how does that affect our ability at the micro level, at the enterprise level, to grow and to scale, and also at the macro level in terms of our ability to create the data mining conduit that we need to create in order to be able to continuously define this elusive thing that we call value. My good friend, Clyde Mackenzie.
Thanks, Harold, for the kind introduction. I can't claim to be an alumnus of JBEC the way Ola can.
Evening student.
They are evening student.
but I'm quite at home because, with people like you and Valerie there, I feel most at home. Well, let me say this. I mean, this has been a real interesting discussion so far, and I'm thoroughly enjoying it. There are quite a few buzzwords, value creation, value proposition, value extraction, innovation, entrepreneurship. There have been numerous points of innovation in the evolution of Jamaican music. We could point to a number of them. The sound system is just one of many. And because that's an important point of departure for the development of modern Jamaican music. Much of what has taken place in the evolution and development of Jamaican music can be traced to what happened in the whole question of the sound system and the kind of sense of innovation and imagination that was brought to bear on the various processes that are related to it. My point is that innovation does not seem to be the challenge that we face here. That is the least of our challenge. I suspect that one of the things that has been addressed by a number of the previous speakers is the question of sustainability. We are pretty good at innovating. If you look at the impact of Jamaican practices across the world, particularly in the music industry, it is littered with so many aspects of our innovation. Even if you look at modern music production, you know, how people like Stargate and Max Martin now create music. It's really an example of the influence of modern Jamaican music on the rest of the world and the efforts of people like Scratch Perry and King Tubby and King Johnny, and what they did in terms of dub and what people now use as samples and all of that. Those things can trace their origins to Jamaica. Sadly, in many instances, we don't lay claim to them. And that is a function of our inability to critique and analyze our role in the international marketplace. So that's a function of, you know, how we view our contribution, and it's a result of knowledge deficiency. Now, there are challenges with regards to entrepreneurship. We have alluded to that in a number of the presentations. Issues of funding is critical because the idiosyncratic nature of cultural production, it tends to alienate, or that might be a strong word, traditional modes of financing. It doesn't jibe very well with traditional modes of financing. And also the provenance of some of the creators in terms of the cultural sphere is not conducive, or it is not something that lends itself to some of the notions of business practices or best business practices, you know, because some people, you know, have notions about how things should be done from a business standpoint, which might be at odds with the kind of creative practices in the cultural sphere. So there are those challenges. But all in all, I believe that the cultural and creative industries are areas that we need to be focusing on in a more direct way. I always like to tell people one of the great advantages of many of the activities and the production activities, particularly in music and some of the other areas, video production and other related practices, is that in many of these areas, you are really facing a flat marginal cost curve. In other words, you are not really incurring an increase in the cost of production by creating additional units. It's a flat curve. So you can create and create and create and create ad infinitum. And that is why it is such a viable means of wealth creation. I don't think we've paid sufficient attention to it. And I think that we have not also identified and codified some of the real fine examples of innovation, of entrepreneurship in the cultural industry. Because I think what we could do is, by showcasing them, we could also be holding them up as examples of what is possible. So one of the things that we're deficient in is the whole matter of codification. There's analysis and there's codification. Some of the best practices, some of the errors that we have made. I don't think we have been very good at codifying these things. And that, I think, is a central challenge. Plus, there is also the commercial value in actually codifying some of these things. I've been part of a project, a recent project. I mean, I'm part of a book publishing company. And I think the stories that are coming out from some of these players in the Jamaican music industry over the years, and many of them are going out now, I think the opportunities, the economic possibilities just for telling these stories, not just in book form, but in audiovisual form, is enormous. And I think that is a tremendous growth area for us. Of course, one of my biggest concerns is to see greater segments of the value chain being controlled by people in the region, Jamaicans and people of the Caribbean, because I think that is where we are going to really see the real development in our industries. For too long, we have been primary producers, in the sense that people on the outside, they manage to capture the most lucrative segment of the value chain by providing the capital for most of these endeavors. And we, like in almost all of our endeavors, whether it be bauxite, bananas, or whatever it is, we simply have to just be content with the smaller segment of the value chain. And I think that is something that we need to look at. How do we indigenize investments in our cultural and creative industries? So that is where I would leave the discussion at this point.
Yeah.
And then I will participate in further in the discussion.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much, Clyde. And you hit on some really important points, the whole business of, as you call it, codifying our experience and our successes as well, Clyde. It's also very important. That's how you create an example of route to market for some of the young creatives, apart from how you help define what the value is. If it is that these icons can do this, then clearly the value is of such, you know what I mean? So it's very, 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 very important. And of course, the fact that Jamaica and Jamaican music has brought so much to international music. The last count is what, 7 genres or something like that we have contributed, or something like that. It's incredible. It's incredible, the innovation that we have, but the creativity that we have that is translated into innovation, you know. Very, very important. On the business of the value conversation, continuing the value conversation, I want to invite at this point a gentleman who is no stranger to the music business and the artist management business, having been in it for some 30 years, right, Mr. Barrett? At least 30 years. Experience in working with Jamaican music industry through, I mean, he has worked with various areas of the music business, public relation, artist management, music production, etc., etc., etc. PR work for reggae and dancehall artists, including Luciano Sanchez, Mr. Vegas, Spice, Protege, Ritty Strides, Egyptian, Elegance, Chronix Law, etc., 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 etc. A man who has real wealth of experience in the whole business of the business side of music. And I speak of Mr. Ralston Bart. He's a publicist, artist manager, and founder of Reggae PR. Ralston, I want you to weigh in on this whole conversation of value for money. Do we have value that persons will pay money for? What is our value for money? Because sometimes, as I think Olienka pointed out, what we think is value is not necessarily what the audience and the market think is value. What is this? How do you weigh in on this whole business of identifying quality and the value for money in our music and by extension our creative and cultural industries? Ralston, welcome, and your thoughts.
Thank you very much for this opportunity to be here and to be a part of this discussion today. There is definitely value in Jamaican music, without a doubt. I mean, when you look at reggae music, when you look at dancehall, and of course ska, which came long before reggae. When you look at the impact that our music has made internationally, you see that other artists from other regions are doing reggae, they're doing dancehall. Even ska is being done by bands in Europe and the UK. And you see, people wanting to merge our sounds into these genres. You definitely recognize that, yes, there is value in our music. And I want to speak specifically about the music. Now, how can we quantify this? That's a very important question. I don't think we Jamaicans at home value what we have enough. The foreigners see it and realize that there's a lot of money to be made from Jamaican music. That is why you have several music festivals that are reggae music festivals, I should say, in parts of the US. Most of them are in California. A lot of them are all over Europe and the UK. Meanwhile, we only probably have like 1 or 2 music festivals in Jamaica. I don't think enough is being done to protect the music. We still have a large amount of foreign music being played on Jamaican airspace. We need to do a lot more to educate the players within the music industry if we really want to see value coming out of the entertainment industry. Because a lot of people don't know how to copyright their music, don't know anything about publishing, which means they don't know anything about intellectual property rights. And we have a large number of artists who are operating as their own managers, their own booking agents. Now, these kind of things are hurting the local music industry. We need, as I said, we need more professionals in these areas. We need managers who actually know how to manage an artist. We need proper booking agents. We need people to advise these artists as to how to go about copyrighting their music, protecting their intellectual property rights, setting up publishing for the music. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done. So it's not that we don't have value, but it's how we're going to increase the value of what we have. How are we going to protect it as time goes by? Technology has made it easier for people to make music right across the world. We're seeing it here. So a lot of the artists are operating as producers, but are they really qualified to produce the music? Earlier, Clyde mentioned people like King Tommy's and King Jammy's and Lee Scratch Perry, who were all great musical innovators in their time. These are some of the greatest music producers the world has ever seen. Now, we have a trend where everybody in the music business is an artist and is a producer. I see a lot of so-called producers becoming artists as well. So there's a state of confusion. So we need to go back to the basics. Go back to the basics, like what was being done in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s. What was being done at the fundamental stages to create the music, to make the music good, to make the music great, to make the music better than anything else that was out there at that time. Jamaican music could compete with the best of the best in the 70s, in the 80s, and the 90s. What of the 2000s? The music is now being watered down. We have something called trap dancehall, which is a new variant of dancehall music. Some people call it trap dancehall, some call it chop dancehall because of the lyrical content of the songs on these beats, because most of it is talking about chopping. And you know what chopping is, which is something that we should not be promoting through our music. So the question about value, I would say yes, there is great value within the music, but we're going to lose that value unless the necessary steps are taken to protect it and to enhance it. That's my take on our question of value within the music.
Respect. Yeah, you're absolutely right that we almost like we strategically and deliberately at cut our value. Almost like it's a deliberate aqua over the pond. I 100% agree with you, and it's and back to the conversation of how it is that we define value and what creates value. We have to look at education and how it is that the youths who are growing up as creatives, how it is that they themselves understand what is value for them, you know, and then accordingly the education and the sensitization and the learning in terms of IP management and just having a proper management infrastructure around you, you the artist, comes into the story. Thank you, Rasa. We'll get back to you in terms of the conversation because enough things that you said that really hit the nail on the head. Appreciate it. We'll move on to our next panelist. The next voice you're going to hear is a lady who is a dynamic public servant. She is an attorney at law as well, and she is an educator, an arts practitioner. And if I tell you, she's one of the lead dancers, principal dancers in NDTC, as well as the fantastic management professional, and that she is. Multi-sector experience and training dedicated to pursuing social transformation through the arts and the creative industries. Marissa Benin is the National Director for the Creative and Cultural Industries at the Ministry of Culture, Gender, Entertainment, and Sports. And if you see her on stage perform, which I had the pleasure of seeing just recently, and what she brings to the table, once she brings to the stage, is similar to what she brings to the job, that dynamism, that leadership, that creativity, that innovation, that intense passion, my friend. So I'm gonna ask you to talk about, I mean, Rostan and Clyde just spoke about music and they touched on the value of that. But I want you to speak a little wider on the creative industries and how does the world see Jamaica as a creative industry superpower? And of course, Marissa, feel free to extrapolate on what it is that the CCI team does at the ministry as well. Marissa.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me, the JTB team. I know it was a little challenging, but these are challenging times. I'm glad Clyde and Ralston spoke about the music industry because I didn't want to touch on that so much. I was actually focusing on the demand for the performing arts, Jamaican performing artists, and production as I am, apart from doing it as a job, it is really my passion. And so I'm glad that, that is out of the way. In terms of the demand for performing arts, I'm going to speak to performing arts first. Many persons are not aware that the Lion King comes here every 3.5 years for talent. Some people may think that's a bad thing, but it has its benefits. And right now there is a Jamaican in every single Lion King around the world. You name it, the international tour, the production in Spain, London, and the UK tour in New York, Germany. We have talent, and Disney comes here, and they do not send their second tier scouts. They send the world supervisor, the world music supervisor, the world dance supervisor, and the director, who incidentally, the last director that came here directed the Oscars 2 years ago. So there is a demand for the performing arts. And I've had the opportunity in my capacity in the ministry to actually meet with them and see how we can establish something in a more structured way. Because one of the flaws, they said, they come, they have, especially for the dance auditions, Jamaican dancers, for example, modern contemporary dancers, we don't audition for things very often. We're in a dance company and you are selected for a part and you learn the choreography and that's it. You don't necessarily compete for it. And that is the difference. That is the weakness that they find. So they come and they say, oh, they are so talented. And we use this term raw talent that I do not like, because I felt that, it's time we start cooking. And that is what I have been trying to do in my own business, Play for the Arts, to cook the raw talent. And that requires intense training, and that requires a little bit more structure than we care to have. So there is no doubt that there is a need, and that there's an interest, and that there's a demand. Where we are not quite ready is sometimes the structure and how we on the ground organize ourselves in terms of the performing arts. So you may have, and luckily for me, I find that this can be fixed. And some steps are being taken. For example, you are asked to take a headshot to the audition, and they may bring a passport size photo, small things that we have been addressing in terms of even making an application to audition. Those are some of the things that we need to work on. So yes, there is a demand. Yes, there is also a need for us to put our houses in order in terms of structure and what we want to be globally. And I also find that another reason why some persons may not know that there is a demand for performing arts and for creators in general is sometimes we don't do a lot of research. And sometimes when we find that there is an opportunity, sometimes there's an hesitation because of what has to be done, the paperwork, the documentation, all of that is required to get you to the next level. That has been a pet peeve of mine. For example, I have taken another example of a demand that Play for the Arts, which I guess this is a vulgar plug, hosted Debbie Allen in Jamaica. And sometimes they come and they may have they dance, they can move, but they may not have a really strong idea, strong sense of the type of dancing. We have very good modern contemporary dancers, just as we have very good dancehall dancers. We have very good modern contemporary dancers, and we have very good ballet dancers, and we've had dancers that have been in Alvin Ailey, Martha Graham, and we now have a Jamaican. He wasn't born here, but we have a Jamaican that is in the New York City Ballet. And Debbie Allen comes to Jamaica, has a workshop, and then teaches 2 combinations and says, well, geez, they're very good. How can I get some of them to be in my production? And just like that, she teaches 2 classes and selects 3 Jamaican dancers to be in the Hot Chocolate Nutcracker. And they were in California for 3 weeks, went late, started rehearsals in September on Zoom, and then flew up to California, learned the choreography, because Zoom rehearsals for dance is just, it's not the same. And they were in hot chocolate nutcracker. So, I'm confident that there is a demand, and where there isn't a demand, there is interest, and where there isn't deep interest, there is at the very least curiosity as to the fact that the Jamaicans can do it, they want to do it, can we try it in the different areas. Production companies, for example, I know production companies, they're sought after in the Caribbean. I know Main Event has done set up in the Caribbean. I know they have also done in Barbados. So it is marketing that is needed as well. It is collaboration that is needed as well. But we definitely have a demand, and I think we all know what we ought to do. We don't need a policy or any more research. I think we're one of the most researched places. The issue is really accepting what needs to be done and implementing it. So I don't want to go any further because this can be, very wide. But I'm eager to participate in the discussion and the questions.
Thank you, Marissa. Thank you, Marissa. And don't worry about the shameless plug. We support it. We support it. We support it. Plus, we love the whole thing about not loving the raw talent argument, because at time we cook it now. Yeah. And there's a whole other conversation, because one sometimes say that we are a country of raw talent.
Yeah.
Just like what people say we are a country of samples.
Yes.
Cook.
Tired.
You know what I mean? I want to eat raw food. Not all of us eat raw food. Certainly isn't happening. So thanks. We're going to come back to you in terms of the discussion. But thank you so much. So to finish our panelists in terms of the panel presentations, to bring up not that we leave in the best for last, although she is the best in some of our opinions, you know what I mean? My good friend as well, and a friend of JBDC, and certainly an expert who has been working in the cultural space for many years, has been recognized as such. She's a member of UNESCO expert panel since 2019, coordinator and lecturer of the Bachelor of Arts in Cultural and Creative Industries and Bachelor of Arts in Entertainment and Cultural Enterprise Management at the Institute of Caribbean Studies. She's a research associate with the PJ Patterson Center for African and Caribbean Advocacy, etc. Deborah has done it all for many years, a prolific and consistent voice for change and for development of the cultural and creative industries. Dr. Deborah Hicklin-Gordon is a communication and culture in development strategist, speaker, advocate, and trainer. And yes, she's here this afternoon to share her thoughts with us about, we have heard the discussion, Deborah, and I know that all of the points of view, being a creative yourself as well, you could have easily articulated yourself. But this afternoon, we want you to weigh in on the whole business of what next? How when we talk about investing, and you wrote an article recently when you spoke about investing heavily in the Jamaican for developing Jamaica's CCIs. When you talk about investment, where do we start? Where do we start, Deborah? In terms of what it is that we need to do next, how it is that we need to invest. And I know that is that topic of a probably 2 or 3 day conference, but just to have you weigh in quickly, Deborah, where your thoughts are at in terms of how this whole business of value definition, value creation, and where do we start in terms of investing in it?
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to keep my camera off. I've become a country girl, and so some of the issues of rural life affect my broadband. So I hope you don't mind if I
see you showing off on Facebook with what's coming out of your garden and things of that nature. People not see you.
All right. Thank you, Harold. Mrs. V, thank you, Ms. V. Thank you so much for having me. And it's wonderful to be able to be here with this wonderful team of people that you've put together to have this discussion. All right. So you've asked me to speak a little bit about investment. And I want us to kind of go back to the macro picture. And we could look at investment from any, number of perspectives. But I want to go back to the notion of creating an enabling environment and the significance and importance of policy in this process in terms of creating an investment-ready environment for cultural and creative industries. So I want to start by saying that an investment climate has existed for Jamaica's cultural and creative industries for over a century. Jamaican cultural and creative industries, as they are now known, and before they were known as artistic, media, or sporting pursuits, have been capitalized through private investment, both domestic and foreign, and public investment. So as early as the 20th century, radio and TV stations, advertising agencies, there was a time when there were a number of expatriates who were coming from overseas and starting these advertising agencies, and the early record companies and so on have benefited from foreign direct investment for many years. But there's also been, and I think it's very critical that we understand, a very robust process of domestic investment that has existed. And at the level of micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises, Jamaicans have been self-financing cultural and creative industries for decades. So they have developed indigenous structures for investment. For example, they have what we call farm day practices where everybody gives sweat equity to the process. And we have called it in our last research project, the process of pods. And we find that work in the cultural and creative industries is now done through pods and is now project centric as opposed to being company centric or institution centric. And when we, in order to develop some of these trends and identify some of these trends that are unique to us, it is very important that we continue with to develop a tradition of research for cultural and creative industries. We also have things like round robins, which of themselves are a form of traditional means of financing, and partners have financed, of course, cultural and creative industries for many, many, many years. And it's for this reason that we really have to start to rethink our traditional approaches to formalization. And again, this speaks to the issue of moving away from the intellectual processes that sometimes surround our cultural and creative industries, and to place greater emphasis on creating a research framework that will help us to understand things that will take us further to the development of the sector, but not only the development of the sector, specific to today's discussion, the issue of creating an investment framework. Right, so also, as a part of our local and existing investment framework, we have the diversification of investment options that have happened more recently, where we have at least 4 publicly traded companies now, which we can see as cultural and creative directly. RGR, Main Event, I Create, The Lab, and you can say Edufocal as well, although they are education, their means of production is content creation. Okay, sponsorship has been another form of financing and investment. Now, that would be more classified as recurrent or operational expenditure than it would be an investment, because it's usually a function of marketing. But sponsorship funds have capitalized so many cultural and creative industries, entities going forward. So the question that we come to know is, are the results of these investments still fit for purpose? Are they sufficient and in keeping with the growth and development needs of the cultural and creative sector and ecosystem in present day? Well, last year, a small group of Caribbean creators called the South-South Collective staged an International Cultural and Creative Industries Investment Forum called ISEC, International Creative Exchange Caribbean, and it focused on investor readiness and investment readiness. Now, we invited a whole range of financiers. We invited a whole range of people from the sector. A number of people from the sector responded, but the financiers, there were no takers, either for the sponsorship ask or from interest from the local investors. And it got me to thinking, what is it? What is it that is missing? And I went back to the research that we did last year. Again, another very important kind of indicator of that the research tends to show us what the trends are. And if we don't know what the trends are, then we are literally creating policy or going to market with information that is speculative. And this is a problem, especially in the investment realm. It is critical that we continuously move the research process forward, because then we are able to spot the trends as they happen. Anyway, as a part of that seminar, we identified a number of things, and I'm not going to go through all of them, but some of them were so out of there it came the notion that financiers admit that they take a traditional and conservative approach to funding of the sector. They also admitted that they need a mindset change, and they also, the Bankers Association also made a number of announcements during that activity that showed, and they have actually delivered on a number of them, like the banking, ease of banking. There's a particular product they have that you can get a bank account really very easily. A number of that was actually announced at that program and has come to fruition as a result. So the questions that is being asked: why are we so rich and yet so poor? And within this forum, the Ministry of Investment, Industry and Commerce laid out the structures that had been put in place through the Ministry of Finance and its own ministry, including the work of JBDC and the it was then upcoming the economic impact assessment and so on, and put out a full list of information. I have all the information here, but I'm not going to go through it. I'm going to kind of wrap up by saying all of this information is necessary to do a particular thing, and that is jog investment, investor confidence. Because investment, as we know, can be capital, time, energy, or strategy. And I think that we pay a lot of emphasis on the investment of capital, but I think we are at a point where we need to be thinking more strategically, and we need to be talking about an investment of strategy. And through that investment of strategy comes a process of planning and policy making, a lot of which has been happening, but happening very slowly. It's been a decade since, at least, because the first set of announcements were made in 2006. It's been a decade since we have been moving towards both policy and legislation, which should put us in a position to make particular decisions that move the process forward. And another issue that is really a challenge is the absence of data, and not only the absence of data, but the kind of vagaries of that data. And I'll give you an example. JAMPRO did an economic impact assessment for 3 sectors: film, animation, and music, 3 industries within the cultural and creative industries sector. And this is just 3 of the 20 that we have identified that can be reclassified in any way that policy reclassifies it, should that process happen. And the JAMPRO study shows us that we have actually exceeded the 5.2% that we have been using widely. And we've exceeded it by far, because those 3 subsectors or industries actually contribute 6.09% to GDP. And it exceeds quarrying, 1.8. Electricity and water supply, 2.9. Hotels and restaurants, 4.0. So if we were to add the other 17 subsectors, which is the work that I know you are doing now, Harold, we could easily exceed banking at 9% and government services at 10.5%. And this is another reason why research is critical to inform policy. There are, in addition to this, as a kind of wrap up, the importance of policy, the Jamaican National Development Policy now, 2022 tells us, and this is coming out of the Ministry of Investment and Commerce, which seems to have a handle on the importance of the policy agenda and is moving that agenda forward. And they have indicated that there are 5 things that are required to jog investment: a national development plan and policy for every sector. They say that investment cannot happen without it. Special strategies for economic growth for that particular sector, another outcome of research. Proof that fundamental rights and guarantees include basic protections. And again, this is another set of information. When we're talking about artists and their viability, we need to be able to at the very least, define who they are. That does not exist anywhere in either legislation, policy, paper, it exists at the level of CARICOM, but in terms of determining who an artist is, how can we invest in art and artistry if we're not clear about the classification of who an artist is? The development policy also tells us that legislation is what is required to impact the cycle of investments. And this has to speak to issues of labor, taxes, and incentives, and of course, monitoring and evaluation of that which exists. So it's all very well and good to be looking forward to research and policy, but there is that which is being implemented. How viable is it? How relevant is it? How necessary is it? How does it relate to the policies of other organizations? So I'll give you another example from the JBDC study recently done. I'm sorry, my dogs are going crazy. And I'm trying to just kind of wrap up quickly. The JBDC study, if you look at the numbers, you will get a clear indication that that the majority of artists that are so prolific and so talented are actually from the category of the working poor. This information must be used by policy to be able to determine where that investment framework must be placed. Must it be placed at the level of big business and entertainment? Must it be placed at a middle level of medium-sized organizations? Or should we be talking about the pre-starts? Yeah, and micro organizations? Is that where we're supposed to be placing the emphasis? Again, it's strategy, it's an investment of strategy that is necessary. Trend setting, I have a whole thing on trend setting and looking at the fact that regionalization has become a big part of the global investment matrix. And as more regions turn to regionalization to be able to attract investment and so on. And my final little bit was really about all those projects that already exist and that are on the books that we keep hearing about. We hear about special economic zones. We hear about particular infrastructure investments and so on. And we're not hearing anything more about it. We need to be able to have a very clear structure and set of information. So it's data, information, strategy that requires and appropriate investment. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. I didn't hear the last part of what you said though. The last part of what you said when you said what there needs to be is, and you were breaking up. What was the last part of what you said? You broke up bad that right at the end there, Deborah.
You probably not hear them. Gone.
Sorry.
All right. You're still breaking up. I've still breaking up, Deborah. I've got to come back to you. I've got to come back. Because
I just really kind of recapped and said that there are other things that are really very difficult. One
not hearing you, Deborah. Type it in the chat, Deborah. That's the last point that you were making.
Yeah, I'll do that.
All right, cool. Thanks. All right, cool. Deborah, you hear her passion. This is a woman who has been at it for a while, you know, advising governments in terms of their policy, their strategy on cultural policies. And you are correct, Deborah, that whatever policy, Ollie can see your hand, whatever policy that we are talking about has to be relevant to know. And can I tell you that post-COVID, different from pre-COVID, different from during COVID. So even that information that we are capturing now as we do the economic impact assessment, we know in 2023, it will tell different stories. And the policy has to be sensible and agile and responsive and truthfully just relevant at the end of the day. And importantly is what I just said a while ago, the agility that the policy has to be written with. It can't be something that is cast in concrete, because I can tell you this, the whole digital economy is transforming the landscape of CCI significantly and quickly on a daily basis, literally. The business model of, say, the music industry has so evolved in the last year that you can't even recognize it anymore, you know? So it's very important that when we talk about policy, we speak about it has to be an agile kind of policy that is responsive, and in order for it to remain relevant, as the young people say, up to the time. See, couple of critical things that Deborah pointed out is that, in fact, we have been experiencing lots of inward investment, lots of domestic investment in the creative and cultural industries over the years, and that has been happening for the longest while. And one would argue, as wearing a different hat, I'm also a member of the Jamaica Federation of Musicians and Affiliated Artists. And they will tell you that the only investment that has ever happened was from private sources and not from government. But that's a different story, because that's not true at all. But the fact is that we have had a lot of domestic investment, or what people call inward investment. And we need to rethink the whole business of formalization, as we have often said, and I 100% agree with that, as it relates to our creative and cultural entrepreneurs, right? And of course, our financiers. What that forum last year, one of the takeaways, Deborah, is that the financiers need education themselves. They need to be informed. They need to understand, we need to understand that there is no model for financing for many of the non-traditional industries, like the creative industries are. So they themselves, and that's not an indictment on the financial sector. Really, if you don't know, you don't know. That's fine. The indictment, if you don't want to know, that's where the indictment is. All right, Ola, you wanted to make a comment?
Yes, thank you, Harry. Thank you, colleagues, for the rich and profound contributions that I'm sure has stimulated a lot of thoughts in everyone who is participating. But I just wanted to follow on, well, firstly from what Deborah said, and also from what you said, Harry, about agility. I think that agility that you speak of is also crucial within the financial sector. And we heard Clyde mention, indigenizing investments. Well, that agility is a part of that. And the innovation that we speak of perhaps the innovation that we should be advocating for is innovation within the financial sector. And we don't need to look any much further than, you know, our colleagues on the African continent, for example, in Kenya. They have quite a number of innovations within the creative industry sector around blended finance. You know, they have flexible, for creative and cultural industries, this is flexible loans where people can pay back little by little, equity financing, those we know already, revenue share. But we also have, they also are working with lease to own for equipment, for example, and something that they call local purchase order, LPO financing, where advanced financing on the cost of goods supplied against a local purchase order is an eligible way of financing. So I'm thinking that the innovation that we are speaking about we need to perhaps look at how we can innovate within the financial sector, but just to also go back to what Deborah was saying and to follow on from that about the investment. You know, money follows creativity. And successful creative cities are planned and curated. They don't just happen by accident. And back in 2016, it's an old study now, but it's still relevant. A study by the Martin Prosperity Institute called Rise of the Global Startup City noted that 2/3 of global venture capital investment centers are located in only 20 metropolitan areas, including San Francisco, Boston, New York, Beijing, Shanghai, Mumbai, Bangalore. And these are all clusters of innovation and creativity. And they also noted that universities are often a catalyst in the growth of these creative, what we then called clusters. We're not really calling them clusters anymore. We can only need to look at the role that Stanford University played in the rise of the Silicon Valley, for example. So it's important when we're thinking about inward investment that we you know, we can model best practices that exist in other parts of the world. And yes, you know, it's a question of resource as well. But as Deborah rightly pointed out, we have been invested, when I say we, I speak about the creative sector, has received a huge amount of inward investment. And it's not that there isn't an interest. And I wanted to also pick up on something that Marissa said about, you know, the large companies coming here to source talent. Back in 2014, I was doing some work for the government of Jamaica around creative and cultural industries and a business plan. And as a part of that, I did some interviewing and I interviewed a couple of people in the UK actually who very, very openly said that they come to Jamaica every single year to do R&D, research and development for their particular sectors. But they come, you know, on a tourist visa and they kind of scope out what's happening and then they go back and, you know, kind of input that into their own economy. So how about monetizing those types of interventions? We know they happen. We know who is doing them. So how about reaching out and or designing or developing something either, you know, through JBDC or in a policy framework that monetizes that? I think we spoke about this nationally recently, a few years ago, when the whole issue of teachers and the brain drain of teachers to other parts of the world. And as Marissa rightly said, there's a Jamaican artist in almost every single creative and cultural center in the world, as there are Jamaican teachers. So how do we monetize that when we're speaking about what we're so rich yet so poor? There are many different elements to actually becoming rich, if you like. And I'm making this point to say that the onus cannot always be on the creative and cultural entrepreneur themselves. There are many elements that make up the creative ecosystem, and all of those elements can be monetized.
Mm-hmm.
So those are really the points that I wanted to make. And of course, in the discussion about value, not to forget the public, because as you rightly said, at the end of the day, they're going to decide what the value is. We remember quite well during COVID that no one wanted to pay for any kind of entertainment that was coming out online. So why? Why? Because they don't see the value. So how do we communicate that value to them once we've framed it in policy and framed it in any other way? But how do we communicate value to the people who are spending the money?
Yeah. But there's also a role for government where that is concerned as well, to incentivize the demand side as well, you know. In other economies, I'm sure some of the audience might know that governments will do things like even buy out a theater seat for a season. and give those tickets away to the communities, to the schools and things of that nature, incentivizing in demand or stimulating the demand for that type of thing. They do the same for museums and things of that nature. But those are, so the whole business of understanding what you want to value and what you want to promote as an economy is also important. I want to, at this time, as we have this discussion about value, recognize Peter Lyman. And Peter, good to know that you are on. I hope you're still on. Peter is senior partner at Nordicity. Nordicity has been our consultant doing work now on the second research work that we are doing as JBDC. And they did the first, the mapping that we did in 2020 that I spoke about. And now they have won the contract to do the work that we're now doing, as Deborah pointed out, the economic impact assessment on the complete gamut of the CCIs. But I want to just, before I open up for comments, and we don't have a lot of time for comments, I'll have about 10 minutes or so, Sancia, but I understand that there are some comments and questions already in the chat.
Right.
So I want to invite you at this point, if you have a burning question, to put it in the chat or to raise your hand for any of our panelists. We had a fantastic conversation this afternoon, and it will continue. The conversation will continue. And certainly at this point, I also want to mention that the session will be available on YouTube in a few days, perhaps by the end of the week or so.
Friday. Yeah,
by Friday. So that if you didn't catch all of it, or if you want to share it with your brethren or your sister, whomever, tell them to catch it on YouTube. And of course, we are always open for conversation around these areas and others, as you know, as that's what we do. But I wanted to just tell you a little bit more about the project that we're now undertaking, and this is financed by UNESCO. I mentioned before that Nordicity won the bid to do the consultancy work, and Nordicity does work like this all over the world. And what it is, apart from doing an economic impact assessment, and Deborah is correct, that figure that was quoted in the mapping was a figure that UNESCO estimated some years ago as 5.2% of GDP. It's far more than that. It's much more than that. And the Jamper study said 6.2, but it's more than that. And that was those three industries. So we want to really, at this point in time, know what the real contribution of GDP to GDP is for the industries. We don't know that at this point. And secondly, what's the contribution to employment? A more accurate way of saying what the contribution to employment is for our CCIs. See? That's very, very important. But even more important, because that EIA gives us a snapshot, place in time, a point in time, a snapshot. What's even more importantly, and what keeps us up in the night, and what gives Mrs. V more gray hairs and me less hair on my head type of thing, is how we go about sustaining that information flow after the snapshot is had. Yeah, to develop a continuous flow of data that will allow us on a continuous basis to get this figure. And for that, we have partnered with the Statistical Institute of Jamaica, right? They are partners on this project. And you know, the green and yellow book, what they and PIOJ produce every year, what name again? Economic and Social Survey or something like that, mm-hmm. Right? And there is a line in that, when they speak about the breakout of GDP and the contributions of the industries, there's a line for services, there's a line for manufacturing. More recently, there's a line for agriculture. More recently, there's a line for tourism products, but there is no line for the creative and cultural industries. Those figures are subsumed, we assume, under one of those, either the services or the tourism product or whatever it is. Either way, we don't know empirically and discreetly what that figure is for a contribution to GDP. Statin has committed that going forward, there will be a figure, a line item that speaks about CCIs and the contribution of the CCIs to the GDP and to employment. So that's very important. Several of our countries that we have researched, like UK and so on, are able to tell that, to give that figure on a daily basis. That's the gold standard. That's where we want to get to. But we need to start somewhere. And in order for us to do that, we need to do what we're doing now, but also to create that conduit, that information, that data conduit. And for that, we also need the partnership or the involvement or the commitment of you, the creative entrepreneurs, to first of all understand that with data, you are so much more stronger. You make a so much more, that much stronger business case with data. So data is important not only for government and then fast in your business. Forget that. It's far more important for you and for you to be able to make a solid case for your business to investors, like we just done talk about, and also partners that you want to market to or to sell to overseas. They want to understand that you can say credibly and in a complete way what your data is, you know? So industry associations is some of the partnerships that we want to establish and strengthen and that type of thing. And I could speak much more about this because this day in our DNA, this day in our blood. But I want to go to you and talk and hear from you some things that you have said in the chat. And if you have any questions for our panelists for the next 10 minutes that we have.
All right, so 2 comments from the chat that I'm sure these are not questions, but rather comments.
Oh, that's from Deborah and Kayla.
The problem has not usually been at the talent level, but at the governance level. That's what one person was saying. And then someone else says,
is everybody hearing Sansia, by the way?
Let's give us a thumbs up if you're hearing me. If you're not, I will increase the volume. It is true that the music output of Jamaica has been historically undervalued. Interestingly, contracts have been unfair or even illegal in most instances. What is needed is a fund to provide legal action to clean all the unfair agreements annulled, in addition to public campaign to expand the knowledge base of our creatives through short courses on the business of music.
You're awesome. Ranton and Clyde in particular. We're calling on persons like you to well, no, you are doing a lot already still, you know. Yeah, go ahead, Clyde. I hear you wanted to talk.
I think the importance of training, you know, can't be overemphasized.
Yeah. Ranston said it as well.
No, because you see, I mean, and I don't think people understand the nexus between training and value creation. Particularly, and we're not talking, I mean, yes, the talent and training for the talent is important, the performer and so on, but also for the supportive structures. A manager who knows his game is going to provide you with better deals than one who doesn't, right? Yeah, that is value creation right there we're talking about. And so I mean, in my introductory comments, what I was saying is that our challenge wasn't the question of innovation, because we have, in point of fact, been doing a considerable amount in terms of our contribution to innovation internationally, sometimes not properly credited or compensated. The question is, what are the supportive structures? Because that is what leads to sustainability. Innovation can sometimes be a flashpoint. You know, it just happens, boom, and, you know, it might just be frittered away. But if you don't have the kind of training, the kind of understanding that is going to create the ecosystems that will undergird the innovations, and perpetuate them, then you're going to have a challenge.
I want to add something to that, Harold.
Yeah, sir, go ahead.
Talk about Clyde just said. I've always wondered why we only have one school of the arts in Jamaica. I mean, as a countryman, I often tell people that Kingston is not Jamaica. Jamaica is 14 parishes. What about people who cannot travel to Kingston to attend this one institution? Why don't we have one in Western Jamaica as well? And two, I don't know what they offer at the School of the Arts. I don't know the programs, but I would hope that artist management and other such things as it relates to the administrative side of the creative industry and the music industry, in particular, is being taught to the students who attend these this institution. So with that said, I think we need to look at the creation of another School of the Arts. Jamaica is a very creative country. We need to harness this creativity. The government needs to put more policies in place to support it and to protect it, because very soon we're gonna hear that reggae music used to be played in Jamaica. Yes, we're gonna hear that reggae is from Jamaica. Interestingly, I saw a sign once. Not a sign. I was looking up some information on Marcus Garvey, and I saw where it said that he is from Harlem. He's a civil rights leader from Harlem, Marcus Garvey. So you see, yes, it's out there, and they take everything that we produce. They take Marcus Garvey. Marcus Garvey is known as a Harlemite. Blue Mountain coffee is what? The Japanese coffee. Reggae soon hear that reggae originated in California or something like that. So we need to do more to protect what we have.
Yeah.
We don't claim our own. We don't claim our own. And
Yeah,
if I can interject here, just to add to what Ralston is saying and to segue into what you were saying, Harold, the issue of creating that conduit for the transfer and the transmission of information generally, the circulation of information is paramount, because it's one thing we're talking about institutions. They are there. But just the flow of information within the system, sometimes for people to access these institutions, for people to understand that even funding might be available here or there, or training is available here or there. But because there is not that apparatus, that infrastructure, that conduit that is providing this information, and it's sad when you have the kind of environment where information is supposed to be so free flowing that people are, so it's almost as if in the abundance of water the fool is thirsty,
Yeah.
So
No, you're absolutely correct, Clyde. Deborah, I see you absolutely correct, Clyde. By the way, and Ralston, by the way, you talk about another Edna Manley. We need to finance this one that we have now. But that's another conversation completely. You can have an organization like an Edna Manley and they're struggling for resources. But that's a different conversation completely. Deborah. But I was about to say that I agree with the comment that you made in terms of the policy must first create a structure of governance. I agree with that. But I would even go before that and say the policy has to be founded in a deep and profound understanding of the CCIs and how they operate. And sometimes we get the sense that that is not always there, and it has to be a kind of coalescing around a central definition and a central understanding of what is required throughout government and private sector, and that's some of the things that we need to be constantly working on as well. So that's important. Yes, Sansia?
Right. So there's a comment. Love the point on innovation in the financial sector, but what does capacity building for this sector looks like?
capacity building for the CCIs.
Exactly.
Right. Any of these panelists want to jump on that? I haven't heard back from you. Kayla.
Kayla had to go.
You had to go? Oh no. Oh no. Well, we can take that. Capacity building.
I think that's capacity building in the financial sector.
Or the capacity building in the financial sector.
Yeah.
No, okay, well, I'll give you an example of that. A few years ago, there is a financial institution that wanted to get into the MSME space, and they recognized that they didn't have sufficient understanding of the MSME space, and all of the innuendos that come with the MSME space, especially at the startup level. And what they did was that they contracted JBDC to teach them about MSMEs and what does the MSME, generally speaking, what does the various business models in the various industries, what do they look like? What does investment, what kind of expectations they can have having invested in the micro and small business space? It's the same kind of capacity building that needs to happen with our financial institutions. But we have to remember, guys, though, that even though that capacity building needs to happen, and some of the financial organizations are open to it. I can tell you for sure that some of them are definitely open to it. But you have to remember as well that they are in fact in business. And their business is to invest to make a return. And it's difficult to invest. It's more like angel investment where a lot of the creative industry entrepreneurs are at. And the products that they have aren't angel investment products, they are loan products. You know what I mean? So the relevance in terms of the right product, developing the right product for the right entrepreneur, some of that work needs to happen as well. So that's part of the capacity building that needs to happen. But it needs to start. Let me just finish point. It needs to start with just a basic understanding of the space. And the understanding of the space means that those 20 industries in the sector that Deborah spoke about earlier, they're not a homogeneous blob. Each of them have different business models, have different investment and revenue cycles, and things of that nature, have different drivers, different balance sheet, a pattern for them balance sheet. So that's where the understanding as basic as that capacity building needs to happen. Was that you, Claire, that was just jumping in?
Yes.
Yes, Harold. There are two things that I think are very important. And Ola Yinka spoke to one of them, or alluded to one of them. And the question of capital, modes of capital formation is a critical one. And the diversity to which you speak is something that I think is connected to this whole question of the different modes of capital formation that might be required for the financing and funding of the various nodes of the cultural industry. So one of the things, and again, the need and the role of the interlocutor is a very important one, and you keep going back to it in your own way, Harold, in that there are these nodes of ignorance that are there, and they need, and what is happening is that they need enlightenment. And a lot of times it is that nodes that should be speaking to each other are not doing so. And what you need is some kind of structure that will enable that kind of dialogue. And it means that function is a translative function. JBDC does some of that, there might be some commercial opportunities also in that kind of a role. And I'm saying that those are some of the things that we have to look at in terms of providing the kind of infrastructure for growth and development in the business. Because when we're talking is not, and when we talk about indigenous investment at a certain level, that has been enormous. I mean, the kind of investment that, I mean, in the music industry that a Coxsone and a Duke Reed and all those people made years ago, and to which small investors still make, and yes, you have some bigger players now who are coming into the industry, you know, the main events and all of that, and some of them are being even capitalized on the stock market and all of that. But even so, there is still the need for structures that will enhance value, especially for small businesses that might be capital starved and might not be conversant with all of the mechanisms for accessing these funds.
I agree with you, my friend, and that's an excellent segue for us to wrap up. Because why is it a segue? Because you spoke about dialogue. This session is actually business dialogue forum, and this is our aim, really, to bring the voices in the ecosystem together. Another panelist who is here on the call with us this afternoon, her team at the Ministry of Ministry of Culture, Gender, Entertainment and Sport had a similar mandate, and that's what Marissa and her team are doing, just to have all the voices, private and public sector, speak on one table, speak around one table, so that sometimes we are guilty of bundling over each other. I think it's Deborah who pointed out that it is what, I think it's 10 or 12 or something like that, or I don't remember, 8 or something like that, ministries that deal with CCIs in some shape or form. And sometimes all of us, well, let's not say sometimes, we all aren't singing off the same hymn sheet. And that needs to change. That needs to change for sure. And in order for us as government to set the example of one voice, we need to have this policy which is being worked on, and also a common understanding of where we are at in the space right now. So as I wrap, I want to really say a big thank you to the panelists, who is really a strong panel that we have put together this afternoon, of public sector, private sector, academia, business development, as JBDC as a center, multilateral institutions putting their voices on the table as well, to talk about this whole business of value management, value creation. And if I get to touch on the point that you made, Clyde, in terms of the fact that we always play at the beginning of the value chain and not up the value chain, and up the value chain is which part the money there, don't it? We have that, we're guilty of that in the agriculture as well, and mining and other areas, but that's for another conversation, guys. So I want to thank you so much for being here this afternoon and sharing in this our second business dialogue. Thank you so much, Olenka Jacobs-Manik, who is JBDC alumni. The whole of the family are JBDC alumni, I just say. Right. Thank you so much, Marissa. I know your schedule has been hectic, and yes, we have come at something next weekend. They're about to support play of the arts. We are supporting it big time. Ms. Kayla Grant from IDB, Clyde McKenzie, brethren, Ralston Barrett, and of course, Dr. Deborah Hickling, showing off on us all the way from the country. Our dog and bark and make a pole for night and that type of thing. We love it. We love it. We thank you so much for being a part of the session this afternoon. The dialogue continues. The conversation continues. And just as a closing note, we said it before, we are in the middle of the economic impact assessment work that we're doing, supported by UNESCO. So the survey is still open, and I believe it will be open till mid-July. So
In the chat.
it is, or the survey link is in the chat. So those of you who have not yet filled out the survey or promote this up, man, make sure say the person's in your pod, right, Deborah? Fill it out, do the survey, because without the information, we won't be able to have the voice that we ought to have. And so with that said, I want to thank you all for being here this afternoon. It has been a good conversation. Thank you so much. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
everyone.